Welcome to Letters from Norway, offering an American perspective from Oslo, with your host, Nick Cameron.
Hello and welcome to Letters from Norway. This is Nick Cameron. And in this podcast, we will discuss the healthcare issue and how to make America hot again. As always, I'm here with my wife. Now, healthcare is a wide topic, and I'm no doctor. However, it's a personal issue for me, and I just wanted to share my perspective based on my own life experiences living in both the U.S. and Norway, and also just what I've encountered. By no means am I a nutritionist. I'm not a doctor. I just want to disclaim all this. I'm just sharing my experiences. So if you're a big food company or something, you can't come and sue me because this is just my opinion. So now, with respect to Obamacare and TrumpCare, there seems to be one side of the issue that both of them are missing and nobody's talking about. No one is really asking why are we getting sick in the first place and why are so many Americans going to the doctor anyway. And when I did some research on this topic, and that's what we'll be talking about in this episode, it really comes down to one thing. It's what we eat. We are what we eat. Even more so, this matters even more than exercise and everything else. It really comes down to what we're putting in our bodies. So that's what we'll be discussing in this episode. Okay, so the lessons I learned from Norway. You know, a lot of times I'm writing letters from Norway, but I wanted to now tell you some lessons I learned from Norway and some things that we can take back to the U.S. So one of the most positive experiences I've had living here in Norway has been the transformation in my health and well-being. I came here in 2013, precisely February 2013, and I weighed well over 215 pounds at 6 feet tall. And by no means was I in NFL football or, a CrossFit shape. I was fat. I was wearing 36 jeans and, the clothes were a little bit big. I felt lethargic. I didn't feel well. It was, a lot of pains, aches and pains in the body. And I was athletic most of my life. I played sports. I was in swimming, wrestling. In college, I was in crew. I ran marathons. So I knew, I was aware of the situation, but I just didn't have the will. And, it was tough. Now I'm down to 179 pounds. I'm fit. I feel great. Granted, I can't run anymore. My joints hurt too much, but I'm cross-country skiing and snowboarding, something I learned while I was here. So you can transform yourself just, through making a few small changes. I even got abs at middle age, and I didn't buy any of those supplements, and I didn't subscribe to any of those six-pack videos or anything. This just kind of came about on its own. And I'll share that story with you for free in this episode. This is a two-part series, so you'll have to hear it all the way through to get the secrets. But they're not really secrets, it's just common sense. In fact, I got in such great shape, and I was feeling so good, I managed to get married to a very beautiful Ukrainian woman in the process. So as I can say, there's some validation to what I'm saying. So what happened back in the U.S. before I left, I was working a very high-stress Wall Street type of job, doing financial analytics. This was just, pressure, going to work at 7 in the morning and coming home 9 at night. There was always something going wrong that would keep you late. So, you start stress eating, you don't have the will or the desire to cook your own food or even look for healthy food. You're just quickly, just food is right now your joy in life. So, I was munching on a lot of potato chips from the vending machines. I spent the weekends at the Waffle House and Denny's, just digging into those Grand Slam meals, 2 pancakes, 2 slices of bacon, and some hash browns. That was like heaven. Still is. It just, you can't do it every weekend. And I really, really have a weakness for chocolates. That really filled a void as well. And I was hooked on, just the sweet candies like the Sour Patch Kids and the Mike and Ike's. So, and they always say no fat on the box, fat-free food, which is very misleading. The stuff becomes fat later on. So the long hours didn't help. I didn't have any will to cook any food. I don't think the whole time I was working there I actually cooked a meal. I was very dependent on takeout taxi, calling them and bringing food to the job. And I would mostly order Indian and Chinese food thinking I was eating a little bit healthier. But it turned out it was no different than, eating Big Macs. The way they prepare these restaurant foods in the U.S., there's no difference between McDonald's and, a fast casual restaurant. Not any real difference. When I came to Norway, I was eating very healthy, and it had been 2 years, since I went back to the U.S. So when I finally made this visit back home, and I went to the Waffle House and the Chinese food, it just didn't feel good. It just wasn't that good for me. So it turns out that, most issues in life, this is based on my experience, can be solved with proper eating, drinking a ton of water, and some light exercise. In fact, I found out diet was the largest component to feeling better. Okay, so doctor visits. As I said in the introduction, why are we going to the doctor in the first place? And as I said, once again, I just want to be very clear on this. I'm not a doctor, but this is my experience and what I have been reading. And I have a lot of friends who became doctors, and they're also, feeding me some information as well. So the Mayo Clinic says that the top 10 reasons are in this order. Skin disorders, osteoporosis and joint disorders, back problems, cholesterol problems, upper respiratory conditions including asthma, anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder, chronic neurological disorders, high blood pressure, headaches and migraines, and diabetes. Now, this is all on my show notes, and I have this all referenced to the Mayo Clinic. This was a 2013 study. So we can really say that most doctor visits are probably, when you group those reasons into three categories: obesity, depression, and diabetes. We're eating too much, we're not feeling good, and our blood sugar is out of whack. So, as I said, I had a little bit of each of those things at one point. Being in my 40s and eating poorly. And I can just say most of that can be solved with proper diet and a little bit of exercise. Of course, there's some lifestyle changes you have to make as well. But it takes a lot of self-discipline, but it's a lot less painful than, going the medical route. So if we get people in America to eat right, this is my theory on healthcare. If we're going to have public health care, if we get people in America to eat right and exercise, we can significantly reduce the doctor visits. As I said, a friend of mine who's a general practitioner told me that 70% of his visits were due to some issue that could be attributed to weight or a sedentary lifestyle, that the person's not moving around enough and then the weight just stays on. It's like a vicious cycle. So if we reduce the doctor visits, then we'll reduce the demand for medical services, which then would reduce the claims on insurance policies. People would be buying policies but not making claims. And so logically then, it's a supply and demand issue, and the market would take care of this. Now you all of a sudden increase the supply of doctors and there's a decrease in demand for their services, or, the fixed amount of doctors against a decreased demand. And then the insurance rates would, go down because the insurance companies now are not paying out premiums, and then more insurance companies would, pop up and would be profitable, and they'd be competing with each other for lower rates. So I kind of witnessed some of these mechanisms, living here in Norway. I noticed that junk food in Norway, the first thing you'll notice here is Cokes, pizzas, hot dogs, burgers, candy. It's very expensive. The most simple of hot dogs here is like $3 on a good day. A pizza here is like $30 or $40 delivered. It's really expensive. It can even go as high as $100. Coca-Colas are like $5-6, and candy is like $3 that you would pay like 50 cents or 75 cents for in America. So it's very expensive here to junk out. A bag of potato chips is like $5 or $6. And compared to the rest of Europe, Norway is way up there. However, apples, salmon fish, this codfish, and then this whole grain crisp bread called wasa bread. I'll have a picture of it on my show notes. I recommend this to everyone. It's quite cheap, even by American standards. So if you're eating healthy, you're actually even saving a lot of money. It's kind of a neat system here. It's kind of driving you to eat well. I'm speculating that here in Norway, this is by design. I mean, it makes sense. We have a public healthcare system here. And I imagine the doctors, in Norway, they have long vacations and the doctors make a relatively fixed salary. There's not rich doctors here like they are in America. There's a few private clinics, but most doctors here are upper middle class, but they're not rich like American doctors. So they want to take as much time off as they can, and they want to, enjoy their life as much as they can. So they don't want people visiting them. So it kind of makes sense. And so they want to, just minimize, they want to minimize the visits to the doctor. So, when I was going to the doctor in the US, time to time, they were always trying to medicate me, and I had to ask for the fitness or the herbal solution. I really had to pull it out of the doctor. I ended up just going to my friends or reading WebMD and self-medicating because I didn't like that. I was always getting bottles of pills. It's just, I think human body is quite a remarkable machine and can cure itself. But, when I went here to Norway for my yearly checkup to the doctor, my doctor's like this Vietnamese lady. She's a Vietnamese immigrant to Norway, and she has that accent like in the movies, in like those Vietnam War movies. And, so I was getting my blood test and everything, and she came over here and told me, she showed me my blood test, and the sugar was way up there, and she goes, "You're gonna die." She was like, "You're gonna die, you're gonna die." She was screaming at me and yelling at me, telling me, I'm fat, I eat too much, I gotta cut my weight down, and she told me I have to come back in 3 weeks, and I was like, okay. But she gave me some brochures on how to eat better, and I knew all this stuff. I was just being lazy. But it kind of just struck a chord that, she was like telling me what my real problem was and how to fix it, and not trying to put me on a bunch of medications. So if people are going here to the doctor in Norway, it's because they got some funk from their kids. Their kids went to the daycare center and got sick and brought it home, or because the weather is nice and they need a day off, or the shock, like when there's a nice day, people get in shock, I guess, and then they need a day off because we only get like 10 days of sunshine every year here in Norway. But this is kind of what I putting this in retrospect, like, okay, so we can't have it both ways. In America, they're always talking about healthcare, but no regulations. So we can't eat what we want and then expect healthcare to be affordable. If we want government health care, then we have to accept a little more regulation and taxes on what we eat, keeping us from using the system unless absolutely necessary. That way the system remains solvent. So we need to have like a very strong preventative side of this business. It can't be all on the cure side. It has to very much be on the prevention side. As they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Or in the metric system, a gram of prevention is worth a kilo of cure. So I don't know why in the US we don't hear more about controlling the health from the diet aspect and what the food intake is. We always hear about it on the cure side, about emergency care and about getting prescription drugs. So in the next section, we'll discuss a little bit more about the root cause of that. So growing up in America, we all, draw our own conclusions and have our own ideas, not just believe everything we read. But I think the reason why we don't hear about the food side is because the food sector in America is highly industrialized and very powerful. Actually, I think the food industry is worse than the shadow government. Perhaps it's a major component of this shadow government. Through food, they can program us and control us. They can make us feel good, make us feel bad. They can one day tell us this is good for us, and the next day tell us it's bad for us, and then we're over-consuming something that's, like grain. They tell us all these bread-based foods are really good for you, and you can't get enough of it. You're supposed to have 70% carbs when I was young. And now it turns out it's all bad. So they can really change the information. And the chemistry has been around for a long time, how these foods interact with the body. But most of us aren't aware of that. So they just keep changing the suggestions, shifting the way we feel. So I feel like, that there's some little dark side to the food industry and the government, and there's some collaboration. I mean, they kind of go hand in hand. America was built on food production. It's what made us great. The fact that we could produce massive amounts of food very cheaply. But there's something that's kind of gone wrong here. It's not really about improving the quality of life anymore. It's maybe, it gave us extra income. Our food got cheap and we had money for a leisure lifestyle. And that's what spurred all the innovation in America, that we had all this disposable income. And then the entertainment sector and all these leisure sectors were born out of this disposable income because we weren't spending a quarter or half of our income on eating. But now it's something else. The food industry has become, I think, something else. But what I honestly, just bottom line, feel is that the more natural you eat, the better you feel. The less steps of processing in what you're eating, the better you'll feel. The more closer to nature it is, the more it looks like an animal, or the more it looks like the plant or the root that it came from, the better it is for you. So this food industry, it's one of the strongest lobby groups out there. And this is probably perhaps where we need a little bit of socialism or government. I'm a pretty anti-government person, but this is one of the places where we need the government. There is a need, I think, for antitrust, breaking up these mega food corporations and mega farms. There used to be family farms in America, like a tradition of this, but more and more farms are going corporate. The children the children of these families don't want to farm anymore. They all want to work on Wall Street or go to Hollywood and make movies. Believe it or not, there's a lot of wealth on those farms, and the kids on those farms have a lot of options. They're very smart. They have generations of, genetics of surviving on the frontier. People from the farms are not that stupid. Actually, a lot of them, have penthouses in Manhattan, or, they have beach houses in California, and they're making movies or doing deals. People don't know this, but, there's very little interest in going back to the farm. So a lot of these families, they sell out to the corporate farmers, who do this industrial, large-scale food production. So that's that's where that's going. It used to be this, get local food thing, but that's dying out very quickly. These companies are only out for one thing: to make money. McDonald's and all these people who've industrialized food, it's all about, making the money. They have enough money, they have enough wealth, they have enough wisdom to perhaps know that they could be responsible, that the food they're putting out there should be healthy and nutritious, but it doesn't seem like they really care. When I was driving along the coast of Maryland, and the Virginia eastern coast, before you cross over that Hampton Bay Bridge tunnel, you see tons of these like giant industrial chicken coops. When I was young, the chicken coop was like just a little wooden house, and there would be like, maybe 10, 20 chickens in there at the most. But now they have these chicken coops with like hundreds and hundreds of chickens, maybe even thousands. They don't even see light. That helps them grow faster. They don't move around, and that helps them put on weight faster. And you see these big fans, just taking the air out because it probably smells so bad. And the only difference, you see the Purdue brand there and the Tyson brand, and you see these huge industrial complexes for food processing, processing all that chicken. And, in the supermarkets nearby, you see this organic chicken or farm-raised chicken or whatever. But the only difference between like organic or natural or whatever those labels are and this industrial chicken is, I think, the last 6 hours of the chicken's life. For the organic one, they get to go outside. So they take some chickens and put them outside for the last 6 hours before slaughtering them to say that they're range-fed or farm-fed. And what's really ironic here is that the few small farmers there are who are truly doing organic farming, raising these chickens out on, letting them roam every day and taking the risk of foxes and taking the risk of, eagles or hawks getting their chickens, or, just the chickens getting into some predicament. These farmers don't have the money to get that organic or natural certification. So, they're just selling to local restaurants or selling to their neighbors, because it takes a lot of money just to get certified to be an organic or natural farm. Okay, so this kind of wraps up part one. I kind of laid a foundation about, the health issues in America and the food sector as being, something to look at. And so next week in part two, I'll kind of get into the culprits, what specific foods are actually affecting our health, and the ones that I've changed and altered, or cut out to get good results. And then I'll talk a little bit also next week about the exercises that I'm doing, so I'm not blowing out my joints. I'm almost 47 years old, so I can't work out like I was back in the Navy, or run marathons. So there's different kind of exercises you do when you're older. And then I also will next week discuss the libertarian arguments about everyone should be free and whatever. So I'll kind of counter the libertarians. This week I'm a little bit upset with them. Usually I'm upset at the Democrats or the liberals, but next week's episode will be attacking libertarians a bit. Yeah, I just want to say, the bottom line of this episode is you are what you eat, and then next week we'll get into more details.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and follow us on social media.